Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. Quite a different one for you today. This was actually a show I recorded with the Exit Point podcast guys, Laurent and Matt, over in Europe and here in the States. They have a fantastic podcast that I've really gotten into lately with a really good name, Exit Point, about base and innovations in base and wingsuit base jumping and risk and everything that goes along with that sport. And they've both gotten recently into paragliding, and Laurent follows my show and the book and reached out and said, hey, we'd love to have you on the show. And they asked a lot of really good, sometimes pretty tough questions, which I really enjoyed. And we had a fantastic conversation. This one's a little bit longer. It's about an hour and 45 minutes, but everything very relevant to flying, to free flight and risk and what I've learned over the years. We take a rabbit hole deep dive on my past, which many of you know from various stories in this show, but just had a really good time with these guys. They asked a lot of thoughtful questions and had some great perspectives. And originally I just thought, well, we'll just release it on Exit Point and let people go find it there. And then I thought, that's just a really good show for the Mayhem as well. So we're going to do kind of a co-release. We'll release it at about the same time, and you'll find all the links to their show in the show notes and some recommendations there. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I had a lot of fun with these guys. Cheers.
See you down there? Yeah, my brother.
Have fun. See you in a few.
One boogie. Get it. All right. I'm just going to kind of push from here, I think.
That's it.
All right, brother. See you down there. 3, 2, 1. See ya.
Woo!
Hello, friends. You're listening to Exit Point,
a podcast about the advancement of base jumping and the exploration of its culture.
Join us for valuable insights and gripping stories from the world's most extreme athletes.
Oh my goodness! This thing is taking energy in my life! Woo!
So, Gavin, welcome to Exit Point.
It's good to be here. We've been looking forward to this.
So, I consider paragliding like the older cousin of base jumping, and I wanted to bring you on because, for one, I've gotten a ton out of your podcast and your books, and not just for my own paragliding, but also the knowledge that comes behind listening to these top-level pilots about mindset, risk management, and so on. And so I thought it would be a really great opportunity to introduce our audience to you and your podcasts, and then get into some of these overlapping subjects that, that really transition really well between the two sports.
Yeah, it's kind of all the same. It's all the same stuff, isn't it? We're participating in sports that have risk, and that the end result is the education and the learning is the same stuff. You're dealing with the same things.
Absolutely. So before we get too deep into it, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name's Gavin, and I guess I would call myself an adventurer before anything else. I grew up out in Tahoe. I grew up ski racing and got really seriously into it, and had a very brief run on the U.S. team in my late teens, and then destroyed my knees out in a downhill in Aspen, and tried to come back and kind of get ready for my goal was the Olympics in Norway in '94, and came back the next year and destroyed my left one again. And the doctor said, yep, I can put you back together. You can keep doing this, but unless we get some technology that I don't know about, you're not going to be walking when you're 30. And that was the first time. I mean, I was in my teens. You're invincible, right? You just don't listen to this stuff. But that really hit me. I thought, wow, it seems like you'd want to walk when you're 30. So I went to school. I went out to Boulder and just transferred into CU, and immediately got really into climbing. And then not too long after that, got really into kayaking and started doing really pretty serious stuff. My paddle partner back in the day was a young kid named Teo Berman, who went on to be a big Red Bull paddler and did a lot of the Twitch films. And the first Twitch film was actually he and I and this guy Brett. We were down in Mexico doing a bunch of first ascents down there, and we're just shooting footage with, I don't even remember what we had. And he was doing these drops that were just mind-blowingly dangerous and gnarly. And the guy who was making the Twitch films needed some footage. Some of that footage ended up in Twitch, the first one. And Teo went on to big bad things with kayaking for a while. And I nearly died on that trip. And it's a long story, but I truly actually died in the river running a big drop, and should have not come up. It was a miracle that I did. And that changed things in a big way for me with paddling. And I still consider myself a paddler, but I just, it really shifted what I was able to do and have fun doing it. And so, not too long after that, a few years, I guess, but not too long after that, I set off to sail around the world, and that became a business because I was broke. I didn't have money to sail around the world. So, eventually this wasn't really early on, but eventually we started operating kite surfing expeditions, and it was the financial model was really timeshare. And we ran the first boat, which was a monohull, for about 8 years, and sold that boat in Thailand after the first circumnavigation, and then developed this timeshare concept that was, we surf and dive, we did all the stuff, but it was the clients were really kite surfers, and that was pretty early on in kite surfing. This was 2005, 2006, so it was just becoming a thing. And so our timing was really fortuitous. And I lived at sea, ended up living at sea for 15 years, almost 15 years, did a couple circumnavigations. That was my life. I didn't come home for Christmas for 10 years. I mean, I was buried in this, and the good and the bad. It's not all Mai Tais and sunsets out there. It's a ton of work. It definitely put a lot of gray hair on my head, or actually maybe no hair on my head. If I took my hat off, you'd see that. But yeah, that was really my life for most of the 2000s into the early kind of 2011, 2012. But about midway through that, it's a whole nother story, but I started dating a gal who grew up in Alaska. Actually, Alaska and Saudi Arabia, but she was a paraglider, kind of self-taught, which isn't really much that's not a great thing. But she and her brother also lives in Alaska. He's a bush pilot. He can do anything. He's just the most capable person I've ever met. So, they taught themselves how to paraglide. She taught me how to paraglide when we were down in New Zealand on the first boat, and I became just an instant addict. And so, but we were running this boat, and you can't paraglide very well from a boat. So whenever we would get a break, which wasn't often, but we'd get a little bit of time here or there, I'd go to Beer and the Himalayas and paraglide, and I'd go to the Alps and paraglide, and I just would do it as much as I could whenever I could. And so when the boat kind of wrapped up, and it's actually still going, I sold the business during COVID, but in 2011, I stepped down from being the captain. My first mate took over, and I took over kind of the back end boring stuff, the marketing and the members and the sales and all that. I wasn't running the boat anymore. But that was for a couple of reasons. One, I was burnt out. I was done being on the ocean. And then two, I really wanted to paraglide, and I wanted to see what this thing was all about. I mean, in the beginning, I didn't even understand that you could go places paragliding. I thought you just launched off a mountain and landed at the parking lot and went home. And then as I learned that you could really cover some serious ground, I got really into it. I started getting pretty fascinated with this race called the Red Bull X-Alps. This is a very long answer to your question. I'm sorry, I'm rambling here. But,
no, it's good.
But yeah, I started watching the X-Alps when we were actually on the boat, the second boat up in Scotland in 2011. The race happens every 2 years. It's called the hardest adventure race on earth. It's just maddeningly crazy hard. And you race across the Alps under your own power. You either paraglide or walk or run. You carry all your stuff. You used to just have as much time as you needed to get to the end, and then whoever got to the end first, they leave it open for 48 hours, and that'd be the end of the race. And but I think it's got an 11% finish rate, and as an organization, they decided they just can't have a race go potentially that long. I mean, I think the first one lasted 18 days or something. And it used to always start near Red Bull headquarters in Salzburg and end down in Monaco. And you'd kind of run the spine of the Alps, go around the north side of Mont Blanc and all the way down the Maritimes down to the Med. And so that was the race I did in 2015 and 2017 and 2019. So I've done it 4 times. And then in 2021, they changed it. And now it's a kind of an out and back race, we call it in paragliding. So it starts now it starts in Kitzbühel, the site of the famous downhill, and it goes out around Mont Blanc and it comes all the way back and lands in Zellemsee, or ends in Zellemsee, Austria. So it starts and ends in Austria, usually goes across 5 to 7 countries. It's a 1,200 kilometer race. You have a support team and they can water you and feed you and strategize you and, keep you on your feet. Sort of literally. Yeah. And it's just nuts. And it's a wild race. So really a decade of my later life, because I didn't get into that until my early 40s, was dedicated to this race. And the 2015 race, which was my first one, I was the first American to ever make it. Like I said, it's got an 11% finish rate. Not many people make it to the end. But in 2015, I did. And that was the first year they changed it to you just had 12 days to get there, regardless of when the first person got in. And there's a Swiss guy named Kriegel Maurer, who's, the Kelly Slater of paragliding. He wins everything. He's now won it 8 times in a row. His first year was 2009. And so in 2015, he got there in 8 days, which was pretty fast. And I got there a little less than 48 hours later. So by the old rules, I still would have made it, but it was, that was pretty exciting. So I made it in 2015 and thought I was hot shit and then I'd make it every year. And I never made it again. That was the only time I ever made it. But that was a really fun decade. The race is just incredible. It puts you in the most amazing places in the Alps. And of course, it's very intense, very hard physically, but you have these flights. Some of them just little sledders, we call them, when you just launch and land a few minutes, in the mornings before things have gotten thermic and stuff. But you have these amazing flights in really beautiful areas that you just normally wouldn't if you're going over there to paraglide, because you're picking the best days and you're trying to go big all the time. And, when the weather's bad in the race, you got to keep moving. You got to still keep doing it. And there's always times in the race where the weather's pretty bad. So, yeah. And now I'm back in Idaho and I've been living here since 2011 and I've been running comps, both World Cup type stuff and also hike and fly races, kind of like the X-Alps, but smaller here in the States, and trying to get that whole thing going here on this side of the pond. And I still race a ton. Paragliding, I just got done with the World Cup out in Turkey, and yeah, still love flying. So this one's kept my attention longer than all the rest.
Can I ask a question about skiing back at the beginning of this whole thing?
Sure.
Because holy crap, man, that is a really interesting road that you've taken since then. And I'm wondering, how much of that do you think you'd have gotten to if you had stuck with skiing and not gotten injured?
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it, Matt? I mean, I'm so thankful for that injury. Of course, at the time, it was just devastating and my life was over. That's all I knew was ski racing and the U.S. team and the Olympics and the whole thing. And I mean, I still had quite a ways to go. I had just barely made it. I was pretty new into the kind of high level ski racing. And so I was devastated. It actually happened January 15th, 91. That was the day the Gulf War broke out. So it was a day, of course, I'll never forget because of that. But yeah, it just, that injury allowed me to see, it just took the blinders off in a sense with the rest of life. I had never thought about going to school. I had never thought about anything except racing. And so it allowed me to just go, whoa, there's all this other stuff out there. And I think, the training and the coaching and growing up in that kind of intense bubble, in a sense, did play out well for future endeavors. But, thank God I got hurt, really, because I think I still, all those 15 years on the boat, I never touched skis. I never saw snow. And of all the things that I pursue these days, I mean, backcountry skiing still blows away paragliding. I mean, I'm a paraglider. That's my job. That's my profession. But, backcountry skiing to me is just the most beautiful thing we can do in the outdoors. So I'm so thankful I have that background, and I learned how to ski when I was a kid. And, but yeah, it's a great question, because thank God I got hurt, because it did allow all these other things, which are, wonderful.
I got to ask, you trashed your knees younger. How are they doing now?
Another great question.
You've taken them out and back all over the Alps many times.
This will blow your mind. This will blow your mind. I've had 9 knee surgeries, 3 full reconstructions, and the rest of the other 6 were cleanups, but I got to the point kind of early 30s where walking off a curb was dangerous, that things would lock up and meniscus. I have no cartilage in either knee. And then, if you understand the Red Bull X-Alps, you go, how in the world? And I was never an endurance athlete. I was a ski racer. The longest thing would be, I was a downhiller. I was a speed guy, but, a long race would be a minute 45. And a very intense minute 45, but I'd never been a runner. I'm a trail runner, basically because I couldn't. I mean, I can't play basketball. My knees are stable, but they've got no cartilage in them. And so when I started watching the Red Bull X-Alps, it was just, how are these people going so far? I mean, I didn't understand that you could use a paraglider to travel that far, just using thermals. But also just, there's no way I could do this because of my knees. And the timing was crazy, but about the same time, a couple years before the 2015 race, I became really good friends with a guy named Ben Abruzzo, and he's down in Albuquerque. He was also a pilot, but his dad, he comes from a big family of skiers. They own the Santa Fe ski area down in New Mexico, and his dad's a big skier. His dad's dad was a big skier, and they invited me up to Canada to go heli skiing. This was, I think, 2013. And, so Ben, my buddy, just a few years younger than I am, but a professional trainer and a professional uphill athlete trainer. So he owned a CrossFit gym for a long time, but his jam is getting people, doing the MTMMB and stuff. They do big uphill races, which is basically what the X-Alps is, other than the flying. You go uphill and you pound it out on a ton of pavement too, but you're doing typically kind of 1.5 to 2 marathons a day, but you're doing it with all your gear. So you've got to build a different kind of body, because you're carrying a pack, which is not the same as just jogging. It's metric tons over the course of the race. And so he trained people to do that, and he saw me ski, and he saw my fascination with, he didn't even know what the race was. I started showing him all these clips, and he started getting really excited about it. And I said, yeah, but I've got these bad knees, man. I mean, there's no way I can walk 10K on pavement, and you've got to do hundreds of kilometers in that. I can't, there's no way. And he said, man, I've seen you ski. We can train all that pain out of you. We can, we got to get you in the gym, and we've got to get you doing mobility and, a bunch of Kelly Starrett stuff, the supple leopard guy, and, bands and balls but mostly weights. We got to get you in the gym. And I had been in the gym my whole life, back in my previous life, ski racing. So, I knew how to lift, but that hadn't really been a part of my go-to for years. And we just built the blocks starting at ground level. And, literally, I think the first time I went out for a 5K walk, I barely made it. And I called him up almost in tears. And this was almost a year before the race, and we were just getting into the training because it takes about a year of pretty intense training to get ready for it. And so, and he said, don't worry, trust in the process. You'll be fine. And, by April, I was doing 60K on the roads with the pack. I'd walk through rivers first to train my feet for the, so they wouldn't blister, because in the Alps, here I live in the desert, it's really dry. Over there, it's really wet. We knew blisters were going to be an issue, and they were. My feet just fell apart in the race. That's a different thing. But yeah, he just trained, and knock on wood. So that was 2014 going into the 2015 race. I haven't had an ounce. I have no pain in my knees, and I'd had pain my whole life. Just miserable pain too. Just always something I was thinking about, and I just don't even think about it anymore. So
Man, that's great.
He saved my knees, and I don't know what's in there these days. I mean, again, because I don't think cartilage really grows back, but so far, no arthritis, no pain, very, very strong joints. That was basically it, was training my muscles to take the punishment instead of the joints.
Can you speak a little bit to the feeling of loss that, we all get a sense of when our bodies change so dramatically like that, and what your mentality was to really get back into shape and, not just assume or, kind of resign yourself to being in pain for the rest of your life?
God, it's just, I'm like, I'm tingling right now thinking back to it, because it was, what a gift, right? It was just such an amazing gift. I mean, to have pain and really just lack of mobility for 20 years. I mean, I could surf, I could free dive, I could do a lot of things. It wasn't like I was, immobile or handicapped really in any way, but I just couldn't use my legs for 20 something years like I wanted to. And to suddenly be able to not only use my legs like I wanted to, but to use them in a way that I never fathomed was possible. I mean, when you take those 10 months of training and then you put it into this 12-day of the most intense experience you've ever imagined. I mean, it's mind blowing. You're going from 5:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night every day for 12 days, except I got top 3 in the prologue that year. The prologue's kind of like a Tour de France prologue type thing, where they do it. It's a marketing event. Basically, you do a little mini race 3 days before the main race. And I placed third in that. So the top 3 in the prologue got a second night pass. So that every race you have a night pass where you can go all night. Well, I got 2 of them. Great, right? So I could go all night twice in the race. So, there's a couple times in the race where you just go 24 hours. You don't stop. And so it's incredibly intense. And you start at the end, you add up all the meters and feet and miles. I mean, in all 4 of the races, they all ended up in terms of total output pretty similar, even though the weather was very, very different in all 4. But it was between 16 and 20 marathons for the 12 days. I climbed the height of Everest 4 to 5 times, so 32,000 feet 4 to 5 times during the 12 days with a pack. And you just start going, that's my local hill here at Baldy. That's 3,000 feet. So that's climbing that thing 5 to 6 times a day. And it's just, even when I was training, you're going, I can't do it. There's no way. I mean, but you train hard, and then you do this race, and you're like, my body is doing this. This is incredible. And like I said, I'm 5'8". I'm built like a gym rat. Everybody else in that race, they look like marathon runners. They're tall and lanky and skinny. And they're built for endurance. When I train for endurance, I just keep putting on muscle. I don't fit the bill whatsoever. My Ben calls me a mutant, and I am. I'm a total mutant for that kind of thing. So I'm not built for this kind of race, but you start to, your body does fascinating things when you train hard. And yeah, so it was a beautiful thing, man. It was incredible to just be able to move into my 50s so much healthier than I'd been for most of my life.
That was actually one of my questions for you was, because I followed along with some of your training and the races, and I'm an X-Alps fan. You look jacked for an endurance guy, and so that wasn't part of your strategy as far as longevity as an air sports athlete or anything. It's just you look at the weights and the weight comes on.
Yeah, it does. The other part of it though is, for the race, if you see, I have a 2021 kind of highlights reel where I hit the ground pretty hard a number of times. This whole thing started a few years ago with Kriegel and this guy, Patrick Von Cannell, where they were landing downwind uphill. And it just wasn't something you do in paragliding. You land into the wind. You're like an airplane, right? You're supposed to land into the wind, and you definitely don't land uphill. That's just, if you get the timing wrong there, the consequences are really serious. But it allows you to put your glider into even more places. In a paraglider, we can land in really tight spots, but with those kind of skills, you can just stick it in on the top of a peak, that's rocky and kind of nasty. And, but again, the timing's got to be really good. And I trained this really hard for the 2021 race, but then you're in the race and you're tired, you're exhausted, whatever, you blow it. And, but blowing it when you're durable and really fit and you're kind of a wombat, then, you walk away from stuff that would typically break an ankle or at least do a sprain, or, it would be a race ending injury. And so part of all the weight training, and a lot of the other guys would, the guys that don't look at all like me, they look way more like endurance guys, their training was much different than mine. It's doing a lot of running and, a lot of uphill, but not a lot of gym time. But for me, because my knees, and because I'm older, I'm now 52, but I was racing these things, my late 40s, and going up against guys that are in their 20s. I just needed the strength training for the duration of the event. I needed to be durable. I needed to be resilient. And that's what been really determined for me that was necessary. I'm just very weird. When I train like that, I pack on muscle, even though I was also doing a ton of endurance, just a lot of road miles and a lot of going uphill and a lot of, heart rate stuff in that kind of high 120s, just aerobic training for hours and hours and hours and hours. So you wouldn't think you'd be putting on muscle mass, but that's just how my body's built.
Can you speak a little bit to the advantages of being fit for people that aren't doing these extreme races? I mean, in our culture, coming from skydiving and going into base, I think that fitness is not really paid attention to at all. I mean, it's really rare to see somebody even stretch before they go skydiving or base jumping, and certainly like it's rare to see people that are training their bodies for any of this stuff. So if you're not doing like these world-class races, can you give us a little bit of insight into the advantages of being fit when it comes to the flying world?
I can give it to you exactly, because I'm going through the opposite end of that right now. The last 2 years I dedicated to building this house, and building a house, you stay fit in other ways. You're on ladders all the time and you're carrying heavy tools and that kind of thing. But I've lost a ton of that kind of aerobic base and conditioning and endurance. And it's also a habit, right? You build the habit of training, and those 10 years were in many ways the most fulfilling years of my life, not just because of the race, but because you feel good when you move. And, Will Gadd did this great film a bunch of years ago called Move, and he's just dead on. Everything works better, right? You sleep better, you think better, you solve problems better. You're just more adept at everything, relationships, self-care, self-love, everything. And so I haven't had it like I had for a long time, the last couple of years, because I've been buried in this house project. And I notice a huge difference just in every aspect. The biggest one, just being way too lenient on myself for, I'll do it tomorrow. The procrastination has become the biggest evil because I'll go tomorrow. Whereas it used to just be, you're getting it done. And I highly recommend having a trainer. This was the big shift for me. And it brought me kind of back to my ski racing days. I hadn't had a coach. I hadn't had somebody that I was accountable to since those ski racing days. And when I got into racing, and to your point, it doesn't have to be the X-Alps. It could just be life. But people are one of two things typically in my experience. You either overdo it or underdo it. Most people underdo it. But, more serious athletes can often overtrain. And, we get strong and we get more powerful when we rest. We've got to recover. And so overtraining is actually more of an evil than undertraining in many instances. And so having someone you're accountable to, whether it's just you're going to do your first 5K or you're skydiving, and just like paragliding, when we go fly World Cups, you're driven up the hill, you launch off the mountain, you fly a task, you land somewhere, you pack your bag, and you get picked up. There's very little physical aspect of paragliding, what's called race to goal. So at the highest level. So it's the same kind of thing as jumping out of an airplane, or really even base, where you're, it's a pretty quick flight. There's not a ton of physicality to it. You can get away with not training a lot. But I think we're leaving out what it does for your brain. And, these sports require a lot of consumption, a lot of calories with our minds. That was actually when we ran the figures on the Red Bull X-Alps, your brain's burning more than your body, if you can believe that. It's unbelievable because there's just so many decisions, thousands made every day. And so, I think if we bring that back to whatever activity we're doing, whether that be, something very simple and basic, I think that having someone you're accountable to that you're going to do the work if you've got somebody that you're accountable to, but you're also going to do less than you think needs to be done. That was always a big surprise for me is, we'd have these real weekly grinds. We did everything in 4-week segments. So the first week would be the easiest, then harder and harder and harder. Then we'd have a deload week. And I was always surprised with how much rest there was and how much dedication there was to sleep and chilling out and recovering. And so if you do it on your own and you have somebody that can guide you, man, that money, that's worth gold. I really think that's part of the process that most people skip. I don't want to pay for that. My wife's a trainer. And so, I see what she's able to do, and to offload that, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, those deload weeks can be one of the most difficult aspects of training, just as far as being diligent and getting back to recovery.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you need it both mentally and physically, don't you? You really do.
I wonder if we could piggyback on Matt's question there in terms of decision making, because being fit in the mountains plays a big part in base jumping and the decision making that you make when you get to the top of the hill. And that's for sure something that plays into paragliding, especially in an event like Red Bull X-Alps. The decision making of to fly or not in certain conditions. How do you see fitness playing into your ability to make decisions?
Good question. I haven't thought about it directly like that. I think that being fit and training makes you confident. It puts the endorphins and the hormones and all the things that make you feel good. It becomes part of your daily being. It becomes part of who you are. And performing at a really high level, in whatever sport there is, I've become a football nut, which is really weird to me. But in the last few years, I'm so amazed with the athleticism of what these guys are doing on the field, and confidence is a huge chunk of that. What percentage, I have no idea. But I think that when we're standing on a launch or an exit or doing our jam, whatever it is, if there's a nagging doubt, probably should walk down. And I think that when you're strong and you're physical and you're confident and you're feeling good, then when things are ripe and they're not recreational anymore and things are dicey and you're definitely taking a step into some really serious risk, you want to know you've got it. And part of that comes from being physically prepared and ready, knowing you've got the durability, knowing you've got the resilience, knowing you've got the moves. You've trained this, these are winds or lee conditions, or, these are conditions that normally I'd go, yeah, I don't need this today. I'm going to walk down, but I'm in a race and I've trained for it, and I've trained for conditions that are worse than these, and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling confident, and I'm going to go. And, there's a frame of mind that one of the reasons I got so addicted to the race and I kept doing it, and I really miss it now, is that frame of mind that you get into. It's 12 days of just magic flow time. You are in it, and there's nothing else going on in life. There's no bills, there's no arguments, there's nothing except pushing and going and doing it. And I would fly. I got to actually see this in real time, because the last one, the 23 race, they brought me over as a journalist. So I was in the air every day, and I was doing a ton of filming, and I was with all my friends. I know all those guys and girls. And, I had some terrific flights with every day with, the competitors, but I wasn't even close to that frame of mind. When it was gnarly and dicey, they had a few days in the middle of the race where it was really windy. I would film them launch. I didn't launch. And I kept asking myself, God, would you launch in the race? I wouldn't have even thought about it. It wouldn't have even been I wouldn't even thought, wow, this is kind of hairy. It was just, you just get in a different frame of mind. And that is a beautiful place to be. I think obviously it could be dangerous, but not that many people get hurt in that race. And I think that's because, there has been injuries. There's lots of people that have to bail out because of blisters and that kind of thing. But actual crashes, into the mountain, career ending kind of stuff, there hasn't been any. There's been some close calls, a guy landed in a lake, guy got his face ripped off in the rocks. There's been some stuff, but for a race that's been going for 20 years that subjects pilots to those kinds of conditions day after day after day, it's pretty remarkable what's happened. And that just has to come from confidence and people being so deeply in flow that their minds are operating at levels that weren't there the day before the race and are gone the day after the race. It's a very hard place to get into. I know that for myself, getting into that kind of flow is pretty rare doing anything else. When I go fly a World Cup or something, I'll get into it a few minutes during a task or something, but it won't be all day, every day.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that was brought up about having the tools to walk off a jump. I don't know how many jumps I've been on where people have decided to jump in like not ideal conditions because the walk off actually they've regarded as equally dangerous. So like you're at the top of the Eiger, and walking down tired is more dangerous to them than jumping the thing in a quartering tail. And the importance of having that good decision making and fitness, I think, is a great point to reiterate, because like, man, if it's a non-factor for you to walk it off because you're fit, then you're more likely to make that decision in that moment, and more likely to have a fruitful career over a long period.
Yeah, you guys must have the same saying that we do. I mean, the best pilots are the ones that stand down. The best pilots that are the best pilots are the pilots that don't fly, in a sense. The,
I think that's the sentiment, but I don't think that's the commonly like,
sure.
I think most people that are out there doing it right now, kind of brag about the amount that they don't walk off.
Hmm.
I've heard that over and over again over the last 5 years of like how many, jumps the person did without having to walk off. And this is actually really common in skydiving too, where we start bragging about things that I don't know are bragging points, like uh, 5,000 jumps and I don't have a single cutaway,
Hmm.
and rather than that being like something that is connected to good decision making, the next generation hears that and starts thinking like, well, okay, if I'm going to be an expert, then I shouldn't have any cutaways and I shouldn't have any walk-offs. I should be able to execute at every single point because like I'm top tier.
Yeah, I think that's a dangerous frame of mind, isn't it? I get it. That sounds a lot like peer pressure and the inability. People don't like to be inconvenienced. You want to land at the LZ. You don't want to land a mile down the road where you got to hitch or you got to walk, even though a mile down the road is a 100% safe place to land versus the LZs in a gust front. And we just saw this last week at a comp I was doing down in Utah. We had a dozen people try to squeeze it into this LZ during a gust front rather than just running downwind 10K and landing in zero. And I think that we really need to step back and go. I mean, those are the kind of things where you fuck that up and you're in the hospital and go, what did I do? Why did I do that? What the hell? I mean, all my buddies ran downwind and hitchhiked or got an Uber or walked and they're fine. You're a long time hurt and a longer time dead. So we really, and we've all done it. I've done it, we've all done it. But I think that, I think you should have some kind of rules that you play by. I like rules when it comes to that. And like I said, in some things like the X-Alps, the rules go out the window and they shouldn't. And we're all going, one of these days, something bad's going to happen. And it is. It's just, it is. It's inevitable. But, I think if we play by some rules, then, and we've got to celebrate walking down. We've got to change the culture when it comes to that type of stuff. And, and it's not cool to fly in a quartering, and downwind. And, that's just, man, you're walking a razor thin wire anyway. And so if we celebrate that, and, and I'm a living example of this because for a long time I couldn't walk down. I literally could not walk down. I just didn't have the knees to go down. And so my whole thing was, I'm flying no matter what. I'm flying down because I can't. And, thankfully I built a body that could. I still don't like going down, but, I really had to work very hard at changing my attitude that, well, that'd be pretty stupid. Instead of taking an hour and a half to walk down slowly because I suck at it and my knees hurt, or be in a hospital for 6 months.
I wonder if you could walk us through that mindset because if I might have the years wrong, but your last Red Bull X-Alps, everybody was flying in horrendous conditions. And, we were also, all the spectators were sort of holding their breaths, thinking maybe something bad was going to happen. There was a couple of tree landings and some close calls. And how did it work out for you? I mean, you kind of alluded to it before, saying you were in flow state and you just kind of push it out of your mind. But as a father, as somebody who has a lot of respect for the sport, how did you differentiate between risky and just plain out dangerous? I mean, was there a line that you drew for yourself? Did that line become squiggly? Like,
Yeah.
take us back
I
to
would,
those moments and what where your mindset was at.
I had a bunch in that race. Thankfully, a lot of them were on film, so we could put them together and just remind me of how stupid I was a bunch of times. most of the stuff in the film was pretty benign. I think, you talked about one time I was flying really low in just a sea of trees and, had blown the move, 3 moves before that and ended up in a place where really the only place I could land on was a road, but it was pretty busy. And it was surrounded by power lines and then trees. And luckily, as I was getting lower, going shit, this, trees are usually pretty safe for us. We got to hang our wing on in a certain way, but you don't really want to do it in the race because then you're hanging from a tree and you could damage your wing. And so I'm trying to get to the ground and not get hurt. And there were some littler trees in one area that was not a meadow by any means, and I had to do some pretty kind of radical maneuvers before so I could kind of squeak it in, and I ended up hitting this little tree and walking away. And so part of that is being really tuned into the wing and making the right moves. And I have a very weird fear response I don't think this is trained. You guys have talked to a lot of people about this kind of thing on your show, but back in my kayaking days, I was kayaking with a guy up in northern Washington on this river called the Top Tie, kind of a classic class 5, some small waterfalls, pretty punchy run. And I got off the river, and there was one of the paddlers came up, and he had been doing a bunch of studies on psychology and other things in the past year. And I was with that kid, Teo, who again went on to be this big Red Bull paddler. And he looked into my eyes and said there's, and this sounds weird now, but he said, Teo and I had very similar eye characteristics. And then they ended up doing all these studies on us. And when things get really dicey for me, my heart rate plummets. And so when things get really scary, I get scared. Teo actually didn't experience fear, according to him. He was total mutant, but I get really scared, which I think is really good because fear keeps us alive. I think fear is a great thing, but when it happens, my heart rate plummets. So there can be times where it'll go up, but then if it gets really serious, it just plummets. And I get incredibly calm, and I don't do the whole kind of fight or flight thing. My options widen when I get scared rather than narrow. Typically they really narrow, and you just get fixated on one thing, and you lose the vision to, well, I've got that exit and this plan C and this plan D and all this. So for whatever reason that happens naturally for me, thank God, because I use it a lot. But I think that in the race, the combination of that and the flow and the just pure luck, because some of it has to be. There were so many times in that race. This was not on film. I'll tell you another story. After we rounded Mont Blanc, when we got up to this col where we had to cross over on foot and then get around in the backside, it was blowing 60 miles an hour. And I'm going over to the lee side, so the back side of that. And so these are not flyable conditions. This is just not something you fly in. But as we kind of kept walking around in the lee, and we're skiing down on our feet on the snow and in the glades, and we get further and further around in the lee, so we're in this big bowl. And to walk where I needed to go was going to take 3 hours. It was 20K, tons of descent, tons of ascent, but it's right there. I can see it. I've got to get to this other col just on the other side. It's a 3K flight, 4K flight, just quick. I knew it was going to be nasty. I knew it was going to be just really, really, really on the edge. If I wasn't in the race, I wouldn't even consider it. It's just non-point. This is not flyable. But this is going to save 3 hours. I got to go. And so launched, it was instantly just banger. It's the wings just all over the place, and just, everything I can do to keep the wing open. And and I start making the move, and I get around to this other col, and it was a big fern day. So the fern is in the Alps, is a pressure gradient between the German Alps and the Mediterranean. It's a north fern day. So we've got north winds, and I'm going north. So I'm in the lee of this medio wind that's cranking from the west, that's 60 miles an hour at the top of the col. And then I've got this north fern you just never know when it's going to hit you. It kind of stacks up on the mountains, and then it breaks. And when it breaks, it goes through these passes, which is where I'm heading. So I know I'm going to get my ass kicked when I get to this pass. Maybe not. I don't know. So far, it's feeling okay. And then I go through the pass. Now I'm on the north side. In my mind, okay, I don't have to be worried about fern anymore. I'm on the windward side now. I should be okay. And as soon as I did, there's 100 people at the pass that are hiking that day, and they're 300 feet below me. So I'm not very high. I'm definitely, something happens, I'm in reserve mode. In reserve, by reserve, I mean reserve parachute. I wouldn't have a lot of time to recover if something happens to my wing at this point. And so, but I'm pressing through the pass. It's working. It's fine. And all of a sudden, I just start dropping like a rock. My wing is perfectly open. I've had no collapses. Nothing's, I'm just dropping at 15 meters a second, so at a rate that would break me. This is way too fast going down. And instantly in my head, I got, well, there's no point in throwing my reserve. Something's just throwing me out of the sky. And I'm looking down. I mean, this all happens in seconds. And I'm looking down going, I'm going to break both my legs. Definitely going to break both my legs. And I'm just preparing for, my only move is a PLF, right? I got to keep the wing open over my head, because it's got to be doing something. And I got a PLF. And as I'm going down, I mean, I have no steerage to the canopy at all. There's no forward progress. I'm just going down. And as I'm looking down, there's these patches of snow and dirt. And I'm thinking, okay, please just land in the snow, please. And I'm just trying to steer it as best I could to just land in the snow. And right at the last minute, it moves away from the snow. I'm going on the dirt, and my mind's just 2 broken legs. Fuck. And I hit the dirt, and it's like 12 inches of mud. It's just the softest. It's better than the snow. And I PLF and, roll into the mud and just get soaked in mud. And on the ground, it's blowing way more than 60 miles an hour. So I was just in this weird lee rotor awfulness. And it was all I could do, just hang on to the wing to not get blown off the side of the mountain. So I pull in the wing and just, holy shit, I'm totally okay. Not even a bruise, nothing, and just, so what can you chalk that up to? That's just pure luck, and also a really bad decision. I just saved myself 3 hours of walking and almost ended up in the hospital, so there's those kind of things that are just chalk up another 9 life, man. You got lucky. So I don't, you come out of the race going, that happens in the race a lot. That's the weird thing. I probably, if I hadn't been in the race, I probably would have hit the rocks. You know what I mean? It just, sometimes you're in the right frame of mind to handle that kind of stuff, and you do it, and you do it repeatedly. I had so many, I could tell you stories for an hour from that 21 race. I mean, there was 3 times I landed literally seconds before either a massive gust front or one time I landed before rain that was so heavy that 20 minutes later, it washed out the road below me, and a paved road. I mean, my team couldn't even get to me because it was raining. That was when all those floods were happening in Europe. I mean, just 100-year, 1,000-year floods. And I mean, I'd be having these epic flights, 70, 80K down the road. And now it's time to land. There's lightning all around me. I mean, it was time to land 4 hours ago. Okay, I really got to put it down now. And I'd land and just, oh, bam. And I, but it was 30 seconds in time. I mean, if I'd been in the air, there's no way I could have kept my wing open in that kind of rain. I would have been driven to the ground and really hurt, and it was that's just pushing it way too far. But in the race, we all do it, and we do it again and again and again and again, and somehow you mostly pull it off. But I think the takeaway is always, for me, I can't get in that frame of mind at any other time, so I would never make those decisions. And also B, okay, you got away with that 10 times. Now you have to really fly safe for the next year and not do shit like that. And, stop relying on luck, because there's definitely luck there.
Wow. I wanted to steer this conversation a little bit towards your podcast because, man, it's been a massive service to your community, to our community. And personally, what has it been like for you to have all these conversations with the top pilots in the world? And how has it shaped your own perspective on the sport and the way you practice it?
I could just say, and go, Laurent. You say it, because I'm sure it's exactly the same. One, I'm so grateful that somebody back in 2013, I had all this recording of Bill Belcourt. We were doing this film called 500 Miles to Nowhere, and it's a 7-minute film, and I had him on red cameras for an hour, and everything Bill says is just amazing. And so I had all this stuff that, what do I do with this? And somebody said, well, you should make a podcast. And, well, what's a podcast? I mean, remember, this is 2014, it's a different time. And so I'll answer your question. There's different pieces of it. One, I'm so grateful. Two, because it's paragliding mostly. I mean, it's sailplanes, it's free flights like you guys. We brush into other areas, but no one says no. I haven't had anybody say, nah, I don't want to do that, because, it's a high risk sport. We've all been through a lot of close calls, some too close for a lot of my guests. Many have had accidents or been hurt. And so you get smart, you get better when we get hurt or you have close calls. We like to make cheap mistakes, of course, but it's one of the only ways you can learn is making mistakes. And so I get to learn from all those mistakes without making them myself, hopefully. And hopefully so do the people who listen in. The greatest reward I have from this show are the emails I get on a really regular basis that says, hey man, you saved my life. That is cool. And I'm sure that's exactly what you guys get. So, outside of the time that it takes and the effort and the editing and all the stuff, all the costs, all the things that go into it, because it is a lot, that really keeps me going. And instructors tell me all the time, hey man, when I get a new student, the first thing I do, you got to listen to Cloud-Based Mayhem. And that makes me super happy, but it's also, I get to learn just like everybody else does. I get to sit down with people who they may be, I mostly interview the best of the best, but not always. I interview a lot of people who just come to me with a fascinating story, or they're total newbies, or they've done their first hike and fly race or something, and they got a great story to share. And man, we can learn from them just as much. And so I just feel like I'm a crazy fortunate recipient of a lot of knowledge, because these days I find it's harder. I mean, I used to be a complete bookworm when I ran the boat because I had time, and I don't seem to have as much time anymore. So this is my time to kind of take it in, and I hope I can do it forever. I remember Bruce Marks. He was my supporter in the first couple X-Alps. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but I think right around show 70 or something, he said, man, I mean, how are you going to keep doing this? You're going to run out of people. And I've learned that no, we're not. There's plenty of people out there. I mean, even in a tiny niche sport like we're in, like you're in, there's a lot of people with something to say that's interesting, that can help, that it might just be a fun story, but most stories come embedded with some kind of takeaway that I think makes us better. And, we don't just pursue these things for the thrill, do we? And the adventure and all those kind of things. We also pursue it because I think we recognize that it makes us better, and it makes us more capable humans to deal with life when we're not in the moment and in the thrill, and so I think that there are things that people put in there, and it might not even be right away. It might not be something you recognize then, but when I went to do my book, Advanced Paragliding, that was based on the first 100 shows, and now we're something like 230. But it was a bit brutal. You and I talked about this, Laurent, going back and listening to my voice for 100 shows and transcribing. We didn't have AI back then to do all the magic transcribing that we do now, but it was pretty brutal. But it was also, there were little things that I completely missed when I did it live. And then that became the book. All those little tidbits, all those little bits of information that we all could use a little more of. And so I got more out of it than I think the readers do, because I had to do it. And that's what the podcast is as well. I get a lot out of this, and I'm very grateful. Of course, we couldn't do this without the people who listen to us, drone on and on. But so I'm mostly grateful to them, but I'm grateful that we got started. We got into kind of a cool niche space like you guys are doing. I don't have as cool a name as you guys do. I'm a little jealous of your name, but yeah, it's been an awesome journey. And I feel like in some way, we've been doing it for a little over 10 years now. I feel like it's just getting going.
Have you felt like it's moved the needle in the community at all? You're getting these positive emails and things like that. But I'm wondering, having so much knowledge available to the paragliding community, have you seen the effects of it?
Yes and no. There are things that were things back in 2014 when I started that are still things that drive me crazy. There are, we don't take aviation seriously. We don't teach very well. We don't, especially here in the States. There are other places who do it a lot better, and for some reason we can't mirror what they do. So we're having the same conversations about safety and instruction and separating out schools from gear sales and stuff that's just, man, they figured this out 20 years ago in France and Switzerland, and we're still doing it here. So there are things that, big picture things that I find the needle hasn't moved as much as it should. But I think, but that's not really what the show's about. I'm just talking more in terms of the big picture about the sport in general. Hike and fly has certainly given a whole new life to this sport. I think many people thought it was kind of heading in the same direction as hang gliding, and which is in a tough place. COVID combined with hike and fly, combined with really, really lightweight gear. In the Alps, people couldn't take chairlifts for a couple of years, and hike and fly just went through the roof because people still wanted to paraglide, still wanted to go have fun. And so that has, in a lot of ways, saved the sport and given it a lot of life. And I think we're in a really good place for a lot of things. But, in some ways, I still find where we are quite frustrating, because we just need to take it like they do, learn how to fly a plane. It's aviation. It's dangerous. The ground is hard. We could do it better. And so, but in the big scheme of things, in terms of just personal decision making, let me just wrap that thought up. We send people out with very little knowledge, and they have their P2. We have, in the States, we call it a P2. That's their kind of their beginner license. So you're no longer flying with an instructor in your ears, and you're on your own. It's remarkable how little they know when we send them out to do that. So it's kind of a miracle that they get through their first 50 hours. And that's, I think, a shame. That's something we could fix as a community, I believe. But in terms of pilots, whether you're at hour 1 or hour 5,000, I think there's a lot of knowledge here in this show, some more than others, of course, but that can really help you navigate that. The same thing you guys and your listeners are navigating, that huge realm of not knowing what you don't know. How do we learn to not hit the deck when we don't really know how to not hit the deck? So there's just, again, it'd be awesome if we could rely less on luck. And I think that's what the podcast hopefully does.
It's really interesting to hear you say that about instruction. Over the last several years, I have started to tell people to get into paragliding rather than get into skydiving as their primary mode of learning how to fly, because I see paragliding as a much better education than you get in skydiving. Like I say the same thing about skydiving, especially when it's skydiving to base, is that there are a bunch of people that have insufficient information for how dangerous the environment is. And my question is, what changes do you think we should make across the board in either our methodology or in our standards when it comes to teaching people how to fly in the United States that might put us in step with the European marketplace, or might put us a little closer to a place where people aren't woefully unprepared for the dangers that they're facing?
God, I wish I was more prepared with a list, because I could give you a whole bunch of things. I'll try not to.
Yeah, what's at the top?
Yeah,
of the
I'll
list?
try not to miss some of these. So, and I can do some comparisons. One, in France, to be an instructor, you've got to be a badass. And what I mean by a badass is you've got to be a pretty accomplished World Cup pilot. To become an instructor costs a lot of money and a lot of instruction. So you're a really good pilot, and you're really dedicated to this profession. We are missing all of those here in the United States. I can go call myself an instructor tomorrow. I go take a multiple choice exam that was written 20 years ago, and I'm an instructor. Same things when it comes to tandems. To become a tandem pilot here is woefully easy. It's a joke. In Switzerland, pretty much everybody fails their tandem exam, and that's pilots the highest level. I mean, they take this stuff really seriously, so you've got to do skills on a tandem wing that most solo pilots that have a couple thousand hours can't do. And so just upping the bar, one is, there's just a lot of people that are instructing because they dig paragliding. They've been flying for a couple years and they want some free gear. So that's allowing a threshold that's way too wide than what we should have, which are people who have gone through very strict, very monitored regimes so you can be a competent instructor. Then what we have is we've coupled gear with instruction. So you own a shop. The easiest way to make money in a shop is selling gear. This stuff's pretty expensive, wings, instruments, helmets, all the harnesses, those kind of things. So you're automatically motivated by gear sales to get this person their rating. That should be totally decoupled. That is totally decoupled in most parts of the world. You can't have a shop and a school. This is just basic, right? And so you're motivated by the wrong things. I got to get this guy to be a P2 as soon as I can so I can sell him this stuff. Now, that's not giving very much credit to humanity. And hopefully most people are not doing that. But I'm just saying the incentives should align. They should disalign. Ratings should be hard to get. They're not hard to get here because we want to support our organization. We want to support our shops. We want people to become pilots because you make money from that. Again, you got to decouple that. One way you could do that is your instructor can't give you the exam. The exam is done by a regional examiner. We have 4 or 5 in the country or something. They're paid from an outside entity like USHPA. So our flying organization in the United States is United States Hang Gliding, Paragliding. They've been with us forever. They're a big lobbying effort. They keep sites open. They do a lot of good stuff. And what if they pay the regional examiner, whatever it takes, $200 to give the exam? So that regional examiner is not in bed with the school. They're not in bed with anybody to try to get this person signed off when they're not ready. You know, the instructor goes, my student is ready. He failed. Back to the instructor. Fine for the instructor. The instructor is going to make more money on better education. The instructor is also going to learn what they've got to be able to do with their pilots. So it's not just a multiple choice exam. And we didn't really have the weather for that one. I'm going to tick you off anyway. No, you got to do it like they do in Switzerland. You got to go to an examiner. This examiner is not associated whatsoever with where you've got your education or you're getting your gear. They're paid independently, and they can look at this pilot and go, you suck. You need to go back to school. Or, yeah, you've got the skills. I'm going to sign you off. It's got to be at that level at every step of the way. We don't have SIV, which is, situations on vol. So that's where you go fly out over a lake or in a controlled environment and you screw up your stuff on purpose so you get better at handling your wings in a combat environment, right? Super critical. I've done dozens and dozens of SIV trainings. Many people have never done one. Why? Because it's not required. That's crazy time. That's just insane. That's not part of our P3 or our P4 license right now. Our P4 is our advanced license. People come to me all the time. They write me an email. Hey, Gavin, I'm coming to Sun Valley. I'm a P3. And I respond in my mind. I wouldn't do this. That means nothing to me. That means it's actually worse because you're saying you're a P3 and you should know already that means nothing. I set the national record distance here when I was only I wasn't even a P3 because I hadn't put anything into those. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you've done any training. It doesn't mean you've taken a test. It doesn't mean anything. It means somebody has signed you off somewhere. And when I got my P3 and P4, I did it remotely. I asked my original instructor, hey, I've been doing all this stuff. And, oh yeah, I know you are. You're fine. I didn't have to do anything. They just gave it to me, And so how many people are getting that hadn't done what I had been doing? I was for sure at a P3 or P4 level. Absolutely. But most people, especially not if they're telling me they're coming to Sun Valley and they got a P3, that again, it means nothing. It means less than nothing. And so they should mean something. These ratings should mean something. And our instructors should be awesome. And our schools and gear should be decoupled. We should have regional examiners. We should rewrite the whole entire book. We keep and it has been done. We've got, there are methodologies and systems that are out there that are terrific, that make great pilots. And all we need to do is cut and paste. And we've been fighting to do it for years, and it still hasn't happened. So, what I can say you're right. You're going to get way better canopy skills learning how to paraglide than you are skydiving. And so that's step one. That's a great move. There are great schools here and there are not so great schools here, and they should all be great. And so what matters is sending people to the right place. And we all learn differently. And so, it's finding the instructor that you work with well. Some people are kinetic learners, some people are brain learners, that we have to learn from people who we mesh with. And, some instructors can't be all those things. And so we've got to find the right people too. And that's different. I think that's there's always going to be good teachers, right? My little one had the best kindergarten she's ever had, and she's struggling like crazy this year in first grade because she doesn't like her teacher. So that's just a thing. But I think we can do better.
Lo, I'm going to pass it off to you after I interject this one thought that's connected to the standards of instructors. And it really does put a point to what you were saying about having a separate examiner examine instructors. When I came up in skydiving and I was getting my first instructor rating, the course started with the course examiner saying, "Don't worry, everybody, you're all going to pass."
Yikes.
I think that attitude, Matt, isn't it just so wrong? When you get into this sport, what I have people tell me all the time that come to me in the show that I had no idea this was so dangerous. What the fuck?
Yeah. Seriously.
Really? Where did you learn that from? I mean, really? That's what somebody told you? I mean, that's the first thing we got to do is get over that stupidity. I mean, that's just not Right. That's how we, because again, and that's the coupling of the sales with the instruction. How many people are going to keep
Totally.
doing this when you show up and go, "Hey, I'm really excited you're here. You could die doing this, and you're probably going to get hurt because just about everybody does. Okay, let's go to the training hill. Grab your stuff.
Right.
I mean, okay, I get it. That's a hard way to start, but we got to start somewhere. I mean, the people have flown, 25 hours and gotten their P2 and have no idea that it's dangerous. Wow. We're missing something there.
Yeah. I believe totally that we are selling a lie in the air sports world when we talk about the sport as safe. And I think it's not just ingrained in our culture, but it's actually literally written into the manuals of skydiving in the United States. Like if you open up the skydiver's information manual, page 1, it will say that a safe skydive is totally possible and that the sport is only potentially dangerous, which is just completely untrue. And I've questioned a lot of people within the community about it that are responsible for those manuals and that language. And their response off the record is always that, well, if we said that it was dangerous from day one, then no one would do it. And like our industry would plummet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with one little minor interjection, I totally disagree with the language. I totally agree with you there. It can be safe, of course, because otherwise none of us would do it. We're all doing it because we think we're going to be the one that's going to escape this. But, so it can be safe, but it's not likely that it's not likely that you're going to get through this without some kind of, most people I know have broken backs. That's a pretty serious injury. And so, we call it the broken back club. That's kind of gnarly. I just think that when it comes to flying, I'm not a commercial pilot. I've never flown a Cub or anything, but one of the first things they do, as I understand, when you're going through that is you go out and fuck it up. You go out and, you stall the engine. And, when you're learning how to fly a helicopter, you learn how to do an auto rotation, you do all this stuff. We're the opposite of that. We're it's all going to be fine. No, it's not. Now we need to start there. No, it's not. It's, you are going to have a collapse low to the ground. At some point in your career, you're definitely going to, if you fly cross country, you're going to fly and you're going to get into a place where you're in the lead, you're in rotor, you're in too much wind. You're going to get in a position where you're way above your skill level. And then it's just a matter of, have you done the training or are you going to get lucky? And maybe neither. And that's a bummer. And so yeah, we got to start somewhere. And that seems to be a big piece that we're missing.
There has been a series of tension knot incidents in base jumping. We have a Facebook group where people share their close calls and accidents. And watching these videos and watching people try to correct their tension knots really screamed that our sport needs something like SIV. And thanks to your show, actually, listening to Fabian and Malin, I've done 7 days of training with FlyEO.
Good for you.
What a great experience.
It is awesome.
And anybody listening to this that has any sort of doubt whether or not they should do it, man, for one, it's ridiculously fun. And two, these ideas of your brake range and how much input is required to get certain maneuvers out of your airfoil is really eye-opening. In terms of releasing a tension knot, or the best case scenario of you interjecting on an incident like that, is to deload the wing in a stall and then rapidly reinflate it. And we see people, and I with all respect to everybody who's posted on our Birds forum, it's massively helpful. There's little jerks of the wrist. You see little tiny inputs of the brake line. And what we need to see is full range of brake motion to completely stall, feel the wind on your back as your parachute deflates, and letting it up and trying that multiple times. And you don't learn that getting your P1 or P2. You don't get that just, flying, coastal soaring. You don't learn that as a skydiver. And most of the time you don't learn that as a base jumper. And this is a vital skill that could save your neck. And so when you're complaining or you're venting about the fact that SIV is not required, man, I'm right there with you. Like, SIV should be required for all base jumpers as well.
I mean, it just should be, yeah, it must be part of your regimen. Like you said, it's wicked fun. I've never seen anybody come out of an SIV that just doesn't have a better toolkit. And having a better toolkit makes you more confident, and it allows you to open up your ability to see. And the best pilots see everything. And so, the more we are able to kind of, again, open those blinders to our surroundings, just makes us better pilots. And SIV is just one of the easiest ways to do that, because it gives you tools that will make your day a lot better if you get in a combat situation where, you lose 15 meters and fly away and keep flying your 100K flight versus having to throw your reserve. That's the difference, really. And it's in many cases, it's save your life difference. And if you fly long enough, as I have, SIV has saved my life many times. And so, it's when something happens, it's instantly where my brain goes, because I've done so much of it and so much repetition, and it's fantastically fun. God, it's so fun doing it.
It's
It's
ridiculous.
great. It's ridiculous.
I'm actually going for another 3 days in mid-October. I'm
awesome.
excited.
Good for you.
One of the things that you talk about frequently on your podcast and in your book is intermediate syndrome. And I think that this is something that carries over really well to all air sports. I'm wondering if you could talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, I learned this pretty early on in my career, or my flying, because, hopefully as we get into this, we've got mentors around us, whether that's instructors or just people on the hill that are looking after us. And because of my background and because of my personality, I shoved into intermediate syndrome hard and long, right off the bat. And just, basically it's that mindset of knowing you're better than you are. And it's a very dangerous place to be. In the beginning, we're ignorant. We don't know what we don't know. And we're a little gun shy and careful and trying to take it all in because we know we're beginners. And hopefully we've recognized, we just talked about this, but hopefully we recognize that it is dangerous. It is aviation. The ground does hurt. At that point, you've already heard some of the bad stories. And so you're leaning back. You're like, man, I got to learn this. And then you have some success and you enter, you might get your first 50K flight or something, or your first even 100K flight. And now you're the shit. Now you're good at this, and you're become less instructable. You've become more, your ego's driving the ship, and but you're still a very, very, very novice pilot. And in my mind, depending on, this is really flexible. This isn't a hard number by any means, but we're intermediates, couple thousand hours in. Most people never even get to that many hours in flying their whole careers. So, I think we should put a really wide span on what an intermediate means. I've heard 250 to 2,000 hours, but really, to me, intermediate can start as early as 10 hours in. For some people that are just, man, I am good. I've done my SIV already, and I can fly, I can thermal, and, I can spot land, and, I'm good at this. Okay. You're intermediate, you suck. And you're definitely, you're really in this intermediate syndrome, and it can last for years and years, decades. And it can be, like I said, a couple thousand hours. It can especially be more than that if your hours are ridge soaring hours, as opposed to, big XC deepness hours, where you're flying in 8-meter climbs and that kind of thing. So, and it's all dependent on how much SIV and how current you are and how many hours you're getting per year. You can vault yourself through intermediate syndrome into kind of expert halo. That's the final step, which can still be in some ways even more dangerous than intermediate syndrome. But, you can vault yourself through intermediate syndrome pretty fast by, if you're flying 300, thermal hours a year, you're doing SIV once or twice a year, you're doing some comps, you can bust through it and get really good, especially with the gear these days. We've got some young guns in comps, at nationals and stuff who started flying 4 or 5 years ago, who are really good. They're already pretty hard to beat. They're probably at the tail end of intermediate syndrome, and maybe even beyond at this point. So for everybody, it's different, but the mindset for anybody in intermediate syndrome is the same. You think you're better than you are. And that grabs most people, doesn't it? And really,
grabs, it literally kills them.
It literally kills them. It literally kills them. It's an extremely dangerous place to be. And knowing you're in it is the first key. And knowing that, and I was lucky. Again, I had mentors who were willing to put their arms around me and said, "You're going to kill yourself. You keep doing what you're doing, you're going to kill yourself." And what? No, I'm not. No, what are you talking about? I'm not going to. No, I'm really good. Exactly.
So are the strategies for avoiding intermediate syndrome more for the pilot itself, or it sounds like in that last statement you're kind of saying that in order to avoid intermediate syndrome, we need experienced pilots to play a more active role in mentoring people that are coming up?
Great question. I think it's both. I mean, I think that experts, or people who are, that have been in the sport a long time and seen it all, that's what you owe to the community. You have to serve. You have to serve that role now. That's just part of being a part of this community. And if you don't, that's you're not contributing, because someone's done it for you. Absolutely. No one gets to being really good without lots of people helping them along the way. And so that's just, that's your shift now. And that's you're checking in. We always say, with the intermediates, your shift, how you have to contribute is you have to be a retrieve driver, so we all go fly off the hill. You're going to land first because you're not very good yet. And you get in a car and you chase us all day. We've all done it. We've all served our time. That's how you're going to learn. And once you pick us up, we're going to regale you with stories all the way back home. And that's a great way to learn, so I think, at every stage, we've got different responsibilities to our community. And the intermediate sister, the way you phrased it there is, can you skip it or can you miss it? You can't. You just can't. It's just something everybody goes through. Some people longer than others, but I think it's just we've got to force humility on people and I love talking about it because it's so important. And I think it's just something that it's hard to be humble. And I think we have to be when we're playing with aviation. And so you're right. It's a personal thing and it's a community thing.
We've been receiving a string of emails recently or beginners asking how they can find mentors because for one, they're few and far between. And then also they just don't know how to go about luring the mentor into that mentee position. Or rather they're sitting into that. But you alluded to it really well first, like the driving. I mean, anybody that's asking that question is volunteer your car and your time to shuttle and do that kind of stuff. One, it helps give something that when you're asking for something, so it evens the playing field just a little bit, but also you're going to listen to those conversations at landing about how the flight went. You're going to start absorbing how the guys who are good are talking about things and how they felt about things. And all of those conversations in the car or at the landing area around the campfire are absolutely valuable. Now, when you're talking about, to somebody who's looking for a mentor in this kind of environment, do you have any other suggestions on things that they should look for, ways they should act?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is, extroverts are going to be, it's easier for them to do it because they're just naturally outgoing. And I think most people that struggle with this are more introverts. They're more shy. They're a little more, you know, bug-eyed at getting into this and going, oh my God, that's so and so over there. There's no way he's going to talk to me. So first off, just recognize that everyone is going to talk to you. Everyone. Anybody that has done something in this sport has been through it and has seen it. And like I said, it's just part of the culture. And no one I've ever asked to come on the show has ever said no. And that's how it is in the LZ. That's how it is on launch. You know, if you're doe-eyed and new, go up and just say, hi, I'm doe-eyed and I'm new. And I'd sure, you know, can I take you out for a coffee or a beer? Can I have you over for dinner? Can I drive your car? You know, I've got wilderness first response training, or, you know, I've done these other things that make me valuable in this community. And I'd love to, you know, and man, you just opened up a whiplash. You're just going to get so much information from that person. Now, if they're just getting ready to launch, they're going for a 300K triangle or something, then maybe not right now. But I've never met anybody in this sport who isn't really good and they desire to help. They want to impart their knowledge because it's taken them a long time to get it, and they know how hard it is to get it. But you know, the overall thing is just contribute to your community, and you're going to get way more back in return. And that's, like I said, that's driving. I just ran these 2 comps. I just ran a World Cup and a US Nationals. So 2 back-to-back week-long comps down in Utah. And we rely 100%. We had 30 staff for both of them. 100% they were volunteer. So we had drivers and camp coordinators and launch coordinators and, you know, retrieve coordinators. So we had the big positions, and then we had all the people that were just driving and doing all this stuff. Man, there's jam sessions at night. You know, 3 meals a day. We gave chalk talks on days that weren't flyable, that we didn't task. And they're just getting to hang around with, in the case of the World Cup, the best pilots in the world. They're going out and drive and retrieve and picking these people up and hearing a van full of people talk about their day. And you wouldn't believe the stories. And so, you know, that's a week of time where they were able to get months and months and months of knowledge for free. So, you know, be a part of your community, you know, out in Santa Barbara or at the Point, or God, every single LZ over in the Alps, you know, just go hang out and help, you know, just offer to do anything. And you'll be amazed at how fast you learn. I mean, Kriegel will talk to anybody. He's the best in the world, and he's totally approachable, and he wants everybody to be better. You know, that's almost his mission. So because he wants people to be able to compete with him. And so he doesn't hide anything. He tells everybody everything. And I've never met anybody that doesn't do that.
Laurent, do you believe that that's the case in base jumping? Do you believe that the majority of people at the top level, on the cutting edge, want everybody to be better?
I think it's anybody who's worth talking to is going to share their time. I think that there is a lot of trauma in our community where people have been in a mentor position, lost somebody, and wall off now to potential mentees. And this is a real problem. And you know, somebody asked me just the other day about toxic behavior amongst seasoned base jumpers, and you know, I had to agree with him. And I recognized even some of the same behaviors that he was mentioning. And you know, it really hurts to lose somebody that you put time and effort into, and it's a friend. It becomes more than a friend because it's a personal reflection of the instruction that you've given. And when that person dies, it's brutal. And that might be an element that changes things slightly between paragliding and base jumping, or wingsuit base jumping in the Alps, is that collective trauma. And, that's something that we as a community need to work through and have better tools to communicate about, because it's not working. There's a lot of people that are being pushed away from instruction or asking for information. And instead of them going like, I'm going to try again, they go, well, fuck those guys. They're just trying to gatekeep my fun, and they go out and do it. And, we're seeing a run of accidents of people in this, not even intermediate phase, in this beginning phase, who are just not listening because either they've had somebody on the other end give them a bunch of gatekeeping bullshit, based on the trauma that they've experienced, or they're just not in a position to listen. It's really hard to get the pulse on the entire community, on what's going on, but it's convoluted, and it's difficult.
Yeah, that's it's interesting to hear that. Obviously, different phases. I mean, I was one of the first podcasts we did was with Jeff and Shapiro. And,
Jeff Shapiro.
Yeah, and I mean, he'd lost 43 friends. This was right after Dean and Graham, and yeah. I mean, we don't have the trauma numbers that you do, and it's interesting to hear you say that, because I often feel that, and I mean, it happens in our community pretty regularly. Not at the same numbers for sure, and Base is a smaller community, so percentage wise, it's worse. But when it happens, it seems that there are cases that are different than this, but it seems that we avoid it in a kind of a community sense. It's more, just look the other way. I don't know. Maybe that's not fair, but it's, trauma is something that when it's, I lost my best friend this spring in an avalanche, and when it's that personal and it's that is some serious trauma, and I'm still very much going through that, and so that's just hard. But when it's kind of more of a community thing, yeah, I don't know where I'm going here. It's just I think communities can often just kind of brush it away, and you want to keep moving, you want to keep doing your jam, you want to keep jumping, you want to keep doing your thing, and I think I'm sure avoiding is often the easier thing. Maybe not the right thing, but it probably is the easier thing to do.
What would you say about that, Matt?
Yeah, I think there are components of us avoiding the trauma. And I think there are also components of the people at the cutting edge in base jumping, at least, understanding at some level that they got lucky to be there because of how many friends they've lost over the years. And so, in a sense, their resistance or reluctance to bring people along is not just protecting themselves, but born from an idea that they are protecting the next generation from the carnage that they experienced.
It's kind of a downer topic, huh? But
yeah,
I want to reiterate or emphasize that base jumping and the domain that I practice mostly in is wingsuit base can be done in a sustainable fashion. And it really goes back to what you were talking about earlier, and that is to be humble, approaching it with a humble nature. Because in reality, Matt's going to hate if I say it's safe, but it's a whole lot safer to jump off of a cliff, fly straight away from the cliff and deploy your parachute and land. There's oftentimes I'm in my car where I feel like it's a lot more danger than actually just doing that. And so every other part of that becomes this exercise in restraint, self-control, understanding where you are with your training, how you're feeling that day, the personal awareness of being honest with yourself, and what are the conditions like? What can I do? What can I really do? Do I know if I know what I can do? All of those things, it makes it very complicated. And a lot of times, like you said, luck plays into it, whether or not you're going to survive that beginner and intermediate phase. But once you come through that, it's up to us to pass on that knowledge so that people don't have to have that rough ride.
Yeah, Gavin, I'm curious, since we touched on sustainability, how long do you think you're going to be flying? Is this going to be like something that you think you're going to be doing up until you die, or is it going to be something that you maybe leave off in the next decade or so?
Good question. I will do it as long as I can do it well. And what I mean by that is, what I see getting a little scary. I guess I'll do it as long as it depends on how long I live. Is the answer to your question. And by that I mean, no, not that I expect to kill myself paragliding, but I I I think at some point, you know, you're gonna have hard landings, and at some point you just become a little too fragile to do that in a sustainable way. And then, breaking a hip or breaking an ankle when you're 85 is way more serious than it is, at my age now. And so the answer is I will do it as long as I can do it well. I like to be good at things. I'm competing better than I ever have in terms of kind of the race to goal type stuff, not X-Alps anymore, but as long as I can do it well and like Laurent said, in a sustainable fashion, I've been doing this a long time now. I've been flying for 20 years, and I totally think you can do it in a sustainable fashion with the right training and prep and mindset and all those kind of things. And so as long as I can keep that going, I'll keep flying. As long as it's fun. I asked this question a lot with people on the show who have flown for a long time. How do you keep the passion? How do you
Yeah.
keep enjoying this? Because for many, many people, me included, at certain times in my career, it becomes X contest deal. X contest is our database. So, for flying cross country, we upload our flight to X contest, and there's a yearly thing, and there's the longest flight, and it becomes numbers, it becomes data, it becomes a point of glory, it becomes a point of bragging, and it's no longer why we fell in love with the sport originally, which was just, oh my God, I'm a bird. Your first flight off the hill where you do go 5 minutes tops is just, your mind is blown. And then you get better, and 10K doesn't mean anything, and 50K doesn't mean anything, and 150K doesn't mean anything. And you're stomping on your helmet when you land because you didn't go 250, and so pretty quickly we start losing perspective. And I think it's hard to come back to the correct perspective. That takes a lot of mental gymnastics that I think many of us don't have. And so, there have been times where I've gone paragliding because it's my job, because I need to get better. I need to train. I need to, I just need to do it, but I'm not doing it because I just love paragliding. And so there have been times where I've gone, whoa, 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 this is too dangerous to do something when that's the attitude. What's going on here, dude? And rein it back. What's happening? Maybe you need a break. Maybe you need to go find the joy in ridge soaring. Maybe you need to just go do some ground handling and fall in love with your wing again. And, maybe just you need to step away.
Have you done that?
Yeah,
I'm curious. That's the question I was going to ask you.
I haven't really stepped away. I've been, mostly, for the most part, been able to maintain my love of it. There's always been some new aspect of it, whether it's acro or whether it's race to goal or whether it's hike and fly, that's just kept me in it. But there have definitely been times where I've been in the air and going, yeah, not having any fun. And those have been thankfully few and far between. But usually it's in the spring where it's kind of rowdy and the edges are sharp and I don't have the currency. I haven't been flying a lot in the winter. I'm coming off getting out of ski season, and I go for a flight like, Jesus Christ, this is scary. And I'm not really having much fun. And, but thankfully it's always come back pretty quick. I get a little bit more currency and I enjoy it again and I like it again. But I mean, to specifically answer your question, I've never really gone through a down point, not severe in any kind of way. One of my mentors lives across the street from me, Nate Scales. He's been doing it twice as long as I have. And he did the X-Alps back in 2007. And he just, every once in a while, I quit, I'm done. And we all go, oh, okay. see you in 18 months, and he does, and he quits, he sells all the shit, and he's not going to paraglide ever again. And then 18 months later, he gets the gear and he's all fired up and he's ready to go. And he's totally stoked and he's really good. And like, it's, he hasn't skipped a day. And so, there's those kind of people too. And I celebrate that. That's fine. But
let me ask you this. You've done some of the most extreme flying, in the world. What if I were to propose that we go and like ridge or, source some dunes in Southern California? Do you still find that would be enjoyable for you? Or
yes, because I'm doing it with you guys, right? So, or as long as there's mystery and emotion and stoke, I don't care where I'm doing it. Just being around that. There you go. You hit the head on the. That's the answer is, you're feeling a little humdrum and down on the whole thing. Just go be around people, because there's people out there that are stoked. I mean, all these people I just worked with this last week, all the volunteers down in Utah, they're at the very beginning of this whole thing, and just being around that energy and watching them just eat every word I was saying. I'm like salad. It was, that's so awesome. And punching them off the hill in the morning before these comps would start so they could fly down, and then they tell you about their flight, which in my mind, I'm going, yeah, not that exciting. But in their mind, it was really thrilling. And I'm on board with them 100%. It's so neat to be around that kind of energy. And so, yeah, that's an easy way to get it back.
Isn't that the truth? I've been fortunate enough to do some filming for the world's only wingsuit tandem operation, and being there right in the face, flying with people who've never even skydived before, and they're strapped to a wingsuiter. It's the stoke is so high, and yeah, it's infectious.
Yeah, it is.
It kind of reminds us of, man, this is really something we're so lucky to do.
And, I've never done any instructing. I've never done any tandems. I have tandem kit. I take my family and friends stuff, but I've never done any commercial tandems. I've never done any guiding. I've never wanted to make paragliding my job in that sense. I mean, it is my job in terms of sponsorship and racing and podcasts and stuff, but I've never made that part of it. But I'm actually really considering quite seriously, this will be the first time I've said this publicly, but doing some guiding in the Alps, because I know the Alps really well. I've done all those races, all the training. I've flown there a ton, and the Alps can kind of be a big move for someone's first trip over to the Alps because it's overwhelming. They're huge. And so I've been thinking about doing that, because just to be around that kind of stoke. I mean, I could show people places in the Alps where you're top landing and going into a hut and having a coffee, or, staying in a refugio and the Dolomites. And, I could show them an experience that would be absolutely mind blowing. And, these are all places I know like the back of my hand. And, I think that would be a great way to just shoot a whole bunch of adrenaline in my veins and get all ramped up on this, if I ever needed it. So I'm thinking about doing that. Probably not this next summer, but maybe in summer's future. But I think that, it's also, again, it's back to the obligation. I think it's part of what we've got to do is, coddle the people who are new and getting into it and that have all that stoke, because in a lot of ways we get more out of it than they do.
Well, Gavin, I think this is a wonderful place to end it. Before we go, can you plug your podcast and your book? Because they're both fantastic resources.
Yeah, and I think that we'll put this out whenever you guys go live with this one. We'll go live on the Mayhem too. But yeah, the podcast is I think this will be fun for our listeners, and you guys are awesome, love it, and a great show. The podcast is Cloud-Based Mayhem. The website's cloudbasedmayhem.com, and you'll see right there on the homepage, you'll see the book and all the other stuff we sell. We sell a lot of Patagonia stuff because I've been with them for longer than I've been flying, actually. So. But yeah, that was a treat. You guys are awesome. I appreciate it. I hate you for having a better name than I do, but keep it going.
We could easily do this for hours and hours. You're absolutely fantastic guest. Thanks for agreeing to do this.
It was a real pleasure and an honor. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any thoughts about what you've just heard, please don't hesitate to hit us up. A big shout out to Mark Stockwell, our sound mixer and co-producer. We love you, man. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, please visit exitpointpodcast.com. See you on the next one.
find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind-the-scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So, for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription, and it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you'll be in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account, and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.